Hey guys, Marty here. Welcome back to Snappy Videos. Today, we're diving into an investigation of an age-old question. Something that fanboys all around the world would throw around. Digimon is just a copy of Pokemon. Digimon copied Pokemon. Digimon is just a Pokemon clone. Today, I'm going to answer this question once and for all. Did Digimon copy Pokemon? First, let's check out some arguments that would suggest that Digimon did in fact copy Pokemon. Then at the end, we'll look at some arguments to support that Digimon did not actually copy Pokemon. There are many reasons people would come to the conclusion that Digimon copied Pokemon. I'm not going to mention every single one as there are quite a few, but I'll cover some of the key bigger points. First, we're going to look at the reasons from a Digimon copied Pokemon perspective. Then, later in the video, I'm going to look at counter arguments for each of these points. Then by the end, we'll come to a conclusion about which way it goes. Release dates. A simple place to start. What date did each of the franchises release their first product? Digimon released their first product, the Digimon Virtual Pet, in June of 1997, containing a short roster of Digimon on each. They later released several different versions of this, with more Digimon you could play with. Pokemon released their first Pokemon games in Japan on the Game Boy. These were Pokemon Red and Green, and they released these in February 1997. In these games, you played as a boy who went around capturing different monsters, training them and evolving them, eventually to beat the gyms and then the Pokemon League. Purely based on the around a year and a half between the Pokemon and Digimon releases, and Digimon releasing a much less complicated device, this does leave plenty of time for Digimon to copy Pokemon in a lot of different areas. Raising monsters. As you're most likely aware, in both Pokemon and Digimon, the games rely heavily on raising monsters by training them and performing certain tasks, such as with Digimon where you might overfeed them a certain amount of times. Or in Pokemon, there's even evolutionary stones. Let's now analyze some similarities in raising monsters between the two franchises. As Pokemon was released first, let's start there. Again, paying particular attention to the first games, Red and Green, as this will be the starting point for any copying of Digimon initially. In these games, you were given a monster which you raised and trained to battle other monsters. Your monster could then evolve into several different stages. Your initial monster, for example, having 3 different evolutionary stages, but most of them having between none up to 3. In Digimon, again, focusing on that original virtual pet. You were giving a monster which you could raise to battle other monsters. As you progressed, it would evolve into a different bigger monster. Although having more stages, the principle is essentially the same. Franchise names. Well, here's a pretty straightforward one. The names Pokemon and Digimon. Pokemon is short for pocket monsters, whereas Digimon is short for digital monsters, both referring to the characters that you train, battle, and catch as monsters, although one is for your pocket and the other is digital. Just looking at this alone does look like it could have been ripped off. Similar monsters. Some of the monsters are similar, looking at different ones across the Digimon and the Pokemon franchise. And I've even pointed this out in a different video before, link in the description. But now I want to show you some that look similar and could in fact be copies of each other. Check out Moltres from Pokemon and Bergermon from Digimon. These two are similar in color, and if we check out some key points in the design, for example, the flames coming from the back of the head of Moltres and the fiery ears of Bergermon. Bergermon certainly could have taken influence from a Moltres. Caterpie and Wormmon. Tanamon and Oddish. Alright, let's dive a little deeper with some more detail and let's check out Gatomon, an evil cat Digimon that walks on 2 legs, teamed up with some other pretty evil partners. This sounds a lot like Meowth from Pokemon. This isn't taking into account that Gatomon does in fact turn good. The initial evil cat lines up pretty well with Meowth. The main characters. So in Pokemon, we have the young boy dressed in blue with a yellow monster as his partner. Oh, wait on a minute. Did I just describe Tai and Agumon from Digimon? I know up until now we've mostly looked at the initial games, but the Pokemon TV series aired initially in 1997, whereas the Digimon one not until 1999. So there is plenty of time for some copying to occur. Alright, so now we've looked at some pretty compelling arguments as to why Digimon could have probably copied Pokemon. It's not looking good. I do feel like such an evil person mentioning points for why Digimon may have copied Pokemon without some counter arguments in there. So now it's time. Let's poke some holes in the previous statements. Now let's see if we can prove that Digimon did not copy Pokemon. Our first argument, release dates. Digimon appeared a year after Pokemon Red and Green. However, let's now take a look at where exactly Digimon originated from to explain this point away. If you didn't know, Digimon is a variation from the Tamagotchi virtual pet. Tamagotchi came out in 1996 and was a cute virtual pet that you could love. Because of its design, it appealed more to a female audience. rather than the males. So naturally, Bandai as a company decided they wanted to get more of the male market with their products. They already had cute little pets that you could play with, but boys, well, they liked fighting and scarier things. So they developed a form of Tamagotchi for boys. Monsters in a digital form that you could hold in your hand as a virtual pet. And thus, the Digimon was born. Just an adaptation of the Tamagotchi with very similar features, but this time with monsters, rather than cute fluffy animals. Raising monsters. Well, what about raising monsters? Well, in Pokemon, you get to raise Pokemon that evolve between 1 to 3 different forms. Well, again, Tamagotchi had this, and Digimon did adapt that from Tamagotchi. Firstly, in Pokemon Red and Green, they did not start from eggs. Digimon started from an egg, much like the Tamagotchi, and they would evolve into 4 different stages depending on how you raise them. Not only are there more stages with a Digimon than a Pokemon, but depending on what you do, Digimon can branch off into several different ways, whereas Pokemon just have one track. Agumon isn't always going to turn into Greymon. Treat him differently and you could get Tyrannomon, Devimon, or even our poop slug friend, Numemon. In the TV show, although it came out later, Pokemon would evolve and stay in that form, whereas Digimon only went to champion and above to take care of business. Then they would return to their rookie form, or lower depending on how the battle went. Even just take into account the virtual pets and not the TV series, the way Digimon are raised and evolved is vastly different from Pokemon. The names. The names of the two franchises is actually quite a hard one. They both end in Mon. However, they both describe what the franchises are very well. Pocket monsters, or Pokemon. They fit into your pocket, well, at least once they're inside their Pokeball. Digital monsters, or Digimon. Well, they're in the digital world, and they're monsters, so that kind of fits really well too. I think they're just the best names they could give each of these franchises. However, this could be one point that was actually influenced by the other. Similar monsters. We looked at some monsters from each franchise and how they're similar, but let's dive deeper into that now. Looking at Caterpie and Wormmon. Well, they're both worms and they're green, but that's kind of where they stop. Caterpie is pretty thick near his head, but as you travel back to his tail, it kind of starts to taper off. Whereas Wormmon is a pretty chunky fella, all the way from his head, right the way back to his pincer looking tail, which again is different. Wormmon's eyes are on the front of his head, not the sides. And Wormmon has usable arm looking things, whereas Caterpie has these small 4 looking dots. What about Birdmon and Moltres? We looked at them before, and they were very similar. Let's examine Moltres, a fire type legendary bird. Moltres is a member of the 3 legendary birds from the Kanto region, and is a rather strong Pokemon. When you look at Birdramon, it's only a champion level Digimon and isn't that hard to obtain. As for looks, Birdramon is mostly one color. Its mouth has teeth. Compared to Moltres having an actual beak like a bird, Birdramon has massive looking feet things, whereas Moltres again has normal sized looking bird feet, at least relative to its body. I think it's mostly down to coincidence that they both have fire flying birds, not down to someone copying someone else. The main characters. 2 guys in blue with yellow colored monsters. Can't really get more similar than that now, can you? But wait, Ash wears a red and white cap, and Ty wears goggles on his head for some reason, and Ty wears shorts. And Ash, he's a big boy, he wears pants. The color blue was probably chosen because they're boys, not out of copying the other franchise. The monsters, well, they're different too. One is an electric mouse, and the other is a fire-breathing lizard-like monster. It's just a coincidence the outfits are the same sort of color. Conclusion. After looking at all the information, do I think that Digimon copied Pokemon? Well, honestly, no. No, I don't. Sure, there are some similarities, but you can find that with so many different TV shows and games. It doesn't mean that they copied each other. They just both had some really good ideas around the same time. What do you think? Do you think Digimon copied Pokemon? Do you maybe think Pokemon snuck it around us and actually copied Digimon? Let's see your opinions in the comments below.